What's up, friends? Aaron Mac BS detector. Okay, here we go. I was trying to detect where my book is so we can read it. All right. This is part 50 million. I don't even know. I swear to God, I feel like this book has had a lot of parts for this reading. Okay. Arthur Kessler, the 13th tribe. Okay, this is what we're reading. And now we're getting back here to the parts where it's like getting pretty good and juicy, like where all of the actual points that need to be made for people to realize that the Shemayanist state of Israel, Yasharel, whatever you want to say, like I'm afraid to even say these words on here because I recorded a video once and I said the word Israel, like I don't know how many times, and the J word, like I don't know how many times, and it would not upload. I had to literally go and re-record it and say J's and Shemayanism because YouTube is owned by Shemayanists. And I hope you know what I mean when I say that. Obviously, we got to use code words here. I mean, even the Olive Roots podcast, what is his name? Cozy? He's a Palestinian Christian, and he calls them the Jays. I mean, we got to use the code language here. And I'm now waiting for like them to start, censoring people that call them Jays. It's crazy. It's getting crazy out here. They're committing a Shemenocide. So please, for the love of God. And a lot of, I just did like a little short, but I'm kind of going to go into it here because I feel like it needs to be repeated. Okay. A lot of the Torah community, the people that follow Torah, that are looking, and I see a lot of people looking to unregenerate, unrepentant Jays to tell them how to follow Torah when they don't even practice Torah. The Karaites, those are like the only ones. And I think they're pretty much the only ones that have throughout history. And people are like, oh, the Sephardi's. No, I think the Sephardi's are doing the Talmud too. They're all doing the Talmud. They're all worshiping the devil. They're all allegedly, I'm going to say allegedly, eating BABIES. That's part of their religion. All this SRA, all this, transgender, stuff. This is all their religion. This is their religion. So when you see stuff, go watch Mr. E. I think was it Mr. E? It was either Mr. E or it might have been the Olive Roots guy showing Madonna, how she was like following Kabbalah, how they say it, Kabbalah, which is legit Satanism. I mean, that's what it is. So these people in Israel, and I feel like a lot of people are starting to wake up. They, A, worship the devil. B, do not follow Torah any freaking way. And they're going to sit there and presume to tell you guys, you Torah observant Christians, brothers and sisters, that, you got to do this and you got to do that. Who says? They're not the authority. They are not the authority. Jesus is the authority, and his name is Jesus. It's not Yeshua, it's not Yahushua, it's not Yahuwashi, it is Jesus. Acts 4:12 says there is only one name under heaven by which man can be saved, and it is Jesus. And people are like, there was no J in that time. Okay, but there was a letter I, and when it preceded a vowel, it was pronounced J. So it is Jesus, friends. It is Jesus. The name Yeshua is not casting demons out. The name Yahuwashi is not casting demons out. The name of Jesus, it is. And if y'all don't believe me about Yahweh being the devil, go watch Ben Born Again's channel. I'm not going to sit here and rehash content that other content creators have already done. And if you want to go down into my menu, I've put I'm sorry, I have to take my hair out of this tight ponytail. It's like pulling my head. If you go down into like either my exposing Kabbalah, exposing Judaism, I think maybe it's exposing Maybe Yahweh. I can't just go down into my list of stuff. There's a ton of videos there. It shows you that the Dead Sea Scrolls were conveniently placed in the Qumran caves to basically try and legitimize this fake Hebrew 2.0. Do y'all realize that even, and I saw this other channel, I can't remember, it was like Arcade Drift or something like that. He literally said out of his mouth that you should be reading the Masoretic text Bibles because it's more authoritative. Excuse me? No. Jesus did not read anything that the Masoretes wrote, okay? When the Bible talks about the lying pen of the scribes, it's the Masoretes. They literally came up with this language, okay, like 1,000 years. It's 1,000 years older than the Greek Septuagint, which is what Jesus read, Apostle Paul read, James, John, Peter. They all read the Greek LXX. So I don't even think that we have any. I don't even know that we have. People call it. What do they call it? Paleo Hebrew. What does that even mean? And people just want to believe so bad. Y'all want to believe so bad. These people over there, this book has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that these Jays that practice Judaism, okay, they're not even following Torah over there. They are practicing a whole different religion, and it doesn't have anything to do with Jesus. Nothing. They hate Jesus. And all this quote unquote Christian Zionist, that is like saying hot, cold, or fat, skinny, or like it's two opposing things, you guys. Like you can't, it just doesn't work. So anyways, I'm going to stop ranting now. Okay. And I'm going to read chapter 8 of the 13th tribe. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only. And this chapter is called Race and Myth. Section 1. The Jays of our times fall into two main divisions, Sephardim and Ashkenazim. The Sephardim are the descendants of the Jays who since antiquity had lived in Spain, which in Hebrew, what even does that mean in Hebrew? Because the whole Hebrew is made up. Sepharad, until they were expelled at the end of the 15th century. I wonder why. Because they were practicing Talmud. Allegedly. Of the 15th century and settled in the countries bordering the Mediterranean, the Balkans, and to a lesser extent the West and Western Europe. They spoke a Spanish Hebrew dialect, Ladino, and preserved their own traditions and religious rites. In the 1960s, the number of Sephardim was estimated at 500,000. The Ashkenazim at the same period numbered about 11 million. So all the fake ones, and even the Sephardis, I don't know that they're even real ones. I mean, this is why all the genealogies were destroyed in 70 AD when Jesus, at the Jewish-Roman War, which I'm pretty sure is when Jesus came back, because he didn't lie. He said he was going to be, that some standing there would see him return. So either they're still standing there or he returned, and Jesus is not a liar. All right. 11 freaking million. That's bananas. Okay. Thus, in common parlance, Jew is practically synonymous with Ashkenazi Jew. See what I'm saying? So, or you say Ashkenazi, aka fake Jew. But the term is misleading. For the Hebrew word Ashkenaz was in medieval rabbinical literature applied to Germany, thus contributing to the legend that modern Jewry originated on the Rhine. There is, however, no other term to refer to the non-Sephardic majority of contemporary Jewry. For the sake of piquantry, it should be mentioned that the Ashkenaz of the Bible refers to a people living somewhere in the vicinity of Mount Ararat in Armenia. The name occurs in Genesis 10:3 and 1 Chronicles 1:6 as one of the sons of Gomer, who was a son of Japheth. Ashkenaz is also a brother of Togarma, a nephew of Magog. Gog and Magog? Is that? whom the Khazars, according to King Joseph, claimed as their ancestor. But worse was to come, for Ashkenaz is also named in Jeremiah 51:27, where the prophet calls his people and their allies to rise and destroy Babylon. Call upon the kingdoms of Ararat, Minni, and Ashkenaz. This passage was interpreted by the famous Saadia Gaon, spiritual leader of Oriental J. Uri, in the 10th century, as a prophecy relating to his own times. Babylon symbolized the Caliphate of Baghdad, and the Ashkenaz who were to attack it were either the Khazars themselves or some allied tribe. Accordingly, says Polyak, some learned Khazar Jays who heard of the Gaon's ingenious arguments called themselves Ashkenazim when they immigrated to Poland. It does not prove anything, but adds to the confusion. And God is not the author of what? Confusion. These are not God's people. Section 2. Summing up a very old and bitter controversy in a laconic paragraph, Raphael Patai wrote, the findings of physical anthropology show that, contrary to popular view, there is, quote, no Jewish race. Anthropometric measurements of Jayish groups in many parts of the world indicate that they differ greatly from one another with respect to all the important physical characteristics: stature, weight, skin color, cephalic index, facial index, blood groups, etc. This indeed is the accepted view today among anthropologists and historians. Moreover, there is general agreement that the comparisons of cranial indices, blood types, etc. show a greater similarity between Jays and their Gentile host nation than between Jays living in different countries. I told y'all, they are friggin' white people. They are Eastern European white people, which the friggin' irony of them trying to cosplay or do things in the name of white people to get everybody mad at white people and hate Europeans altogether because we're colonizers and when they're the ones who colonized. All the freaking royals, they're all a bunch of alleged inbreeding, BABY eating, devil worshipping pedos, bro. Like, get the net. And I'm saying this with all due respect and all due love. It's just so frustrating because I had some other person tonight at work who had a baby with some girl that is Jewish and got all defensive and butthurt. He doesn't go to church. He doesn't believe the Bible. None of that. But like, I couldn't say even that Israel was committing a shminicide. He got so butthurt, he didn't talk to me for like 3 hours. I was like, bro, the brainwashing is strong with this one, okay? It's crazy town, dude. It is crazy freaking town. And like, I might be offending people. I literally don't care. People have got to wake up. We got to wake up. And I mean, it's probably too late. Look, Trump, okay? All of y'all that think like Trump was like chosen by God. No. Trump is literally like worships Apollo, okay? Go look at like some of the videos that he's done showing off his Manhattan apartment. He literally has a statue of Apollo. Who is Apollo? Apollyon the Destroyer? The devil, basically. And then I was watching some other thing earlier today that basically admitted a White House insider said that he converted to Judaism in 2016. So, and then now our American military is merging with Israeli military. Have you seen how they treat their own people? Have you seen how they treat the Shmalistinians? They don't give a crap. There is about to be an army of Jays and brainwashed American military here, and they're about to unalive a lot of people. And none of this has to happen. Jesus came back. The end times was the New Testament, guys. We're in the little season. We are in the book of Revelation at this point, all right? Jesus is not a liar. He came back when he said he would. And just because the Jays have spent who knows how many hundreds of years trying to rewrite history, owning all of the curriculums, writing all the history books, molding the minds of everyone, you realize that your TV is a scrying mirror and that you're being programmed. It's called television programming because that's what they're doing to us. You gotta like snap out of it. Just because someone says they're a Christian, you gotta look at the fruit. Jesus said you'll know them by their fruit, right? All right. So, this indeed is the accepted view today among anthropologists and historians. Moreover, there is general agreement that the comparisons... Okay, I've already read that. Yet, paradoxically, the popular belief that jays, or at least a certain type of jay, can be instantly recognized as such, must not be dismissed out of hand. Yeah, that schnoz, baby. And they probably, like, rubbing together their hands. That's probably how you could tell. I'm just kidding. I kid. Okay, let's see. For the simple reason that it has a factual basis in every existence. The anthropologist evidence seems to be at loggerheads with common observation. I don't even know what the heck that's supposed to mean. However, before attempting to tackle the apparent contradiction, it will be useful to look at a few samples of the data on which the anthropologist's denial of a Jewish race is based. To start with, here is a quotation from the excellent series of booklets on the race question in modern science, published by UNESCO. The author, Professor Juan Camas, draws the following conclusion from the statistical material. Thus, despite the view and usually held, the Jayish people is racially heterogeneous. Its constant migrations and its relations, voluntary or otherwise, with the widest variety of nations and peoples have brought about such a degree of cross-breeding that the so-called people of Yasharel can produce examples of traits typical of every people. And that's because they go by the mother's lineage, not the father's, like they did in the Old Testament, okay? And then they've been, they before 1948, they had no quote unquote home country because they were practicing a religion. And they were delivered unto the land that God promised them in the Old Testament in the book of Joshua. It says so. And I've read over that in one of my videos here. So all of this, waiting for them to be entered into the land, and this is a fulfillment of prophecy. No, it is not. It is a rewriting of history and a meddling of people's spiritual beliefs by the British royals and by fake Hebrews, wannabe Hebrews, okay? Anyways. Okay, let's see. Where were we? Okay, the widest variety of nations people brought about such a good crossbreeding. Okay. For proof, it will suffice to compare the rubicund, sturdy, heavily built Rotterdam jay with his co-religionists, say, in Salonika, with gleaming eyes and a sickly face and skinny, high-strung physique. Hence, so far as our knowledge goes, we can assert that jays as a whole display as a great degree of morphological disparity among themselves as can be found between members of two or more different races. They're not a race, they're a religion posing as a race. And this is why it gets so confusing. And it's done so deliberately. But God's not the author of confusion. So I don't see why anybody is believing any of their bullcrap anyway. Okay, next, we must glance at some of the physical characteristics which anthropologists use as criteria and on which Coma's conclusions are based. One of the simplest and, as it turned out, most naive of these criteria was bodily stature. In The Races of Europe, a monumental work published in 1900, William Ripley wrote, quote, "The European jays are all undersized. Not only this, they are more often absolutely stunted," end quote. He was up to a point right at the time, and he produced ample statistics to prove it. But he was shrewd enough to surmise that this deficiency in height might somehow be influenced by environmental factors. Yeah, that and inbreeding and the men pretending to be women, women pretending to be men. I mean, this has been going on. This is ancient stuff, okay? And it's not like just them were doing it. The Greeks were doing it too. But he was shrewd enough. Okay, he was okay. Produced ample statistics. Okay, but he was shrewd enough to surmise that this deficiency in height might somehow be influenced by environmental factors. Yada yada yada. Okay. 11 years later, Maurice Fishberg published, quote, The Jays, A Study of Race and Environment, the first anthropological survey of its kind in English. It revealed the surprising fact that the children of East European Jayish immigrants to the USA grew to an average height of 167.9 centimeters compared to the 164.2 centimeters averaged by their parents, a gain of nearly an inch and a half in a single generation. Since then, it has become a commonplace that the descendants of immigrant populations, whether Jays, Italians, Japanese, are considerably taller than their parents, no doubt owing their improved diet and other environmental factors. Yeah, until now, they're going to have us eating the bugs. Fishberg then collected statistics comparing the average height of Jays and Gentiles in Poland, Austria, Romania, Hungary, and so on. The result, again, was a surprise. In general, it was found that the stature of the Jays varied with the stature of the non-Jayish population among which they lived. They were relatively tall, where the indigenous population is tall, and vice versa. Moreover, within the same nation and even within the same town, like Warsaw, the bodily height of Jays and Gentiles was found to vary according to the degree of prosperity of the district. I mean, and that's like, duh. You know what I mean? Like, if you've got money, you can afford to buy food with nutrients. Okay. 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 Prosperity of the district. Okay. All this does not mean that heredity has no influence on height, but it is overlaid and modified by environmental influences and is unfit as a criterion of race. That should be a duh. That's common sense, which a lot of people seem to be lacking today. I digress. We may now turn to cranial measurements, which were once the great fashion among anthropologists, but are now considered rather outdated. Here we meet again with the same type of conclusion derived from the data. Quote, a comparison of the cephalic indices of Jayish and non-Jayish populations in various countries reveals a marked similarity between the Jayish and non-Jayish indices in many countries, while showing very wide variations when the cephalic indices of Jayish populations inhabiting different countries are compared. Thus, one is driven to the conclusion that this feature, its plasticity notwithstanding, points to a racial diversity of the Jays. So they're not a freaking cohesive race, y'all. I mean, they literally, obviously adopt some of the attributes of whatever country and whatever group of people that they have settled with. You know? All right, let's continue. And this freaking diversity word, bro. This diversity, as it should be noted, is most pronounced between Sephardi and Ashkenazi Jays. By and large, the Sephardim are dolichocephalic, which means long-headed. The Ashkenazim brachycephalic, which means broad-headed. Kuchera saw in this difference a further proof of the separate racial origin of Khazar, Ashkenazi, and, quote, Semitic Sephardi Jays, which the word Semitic means literally nothing to me anymore. But we have just seen that the indices of short or long-headedness are covariant with the host nations, which to some extent invalidates the argument. The statistics relating to other physical features who speak against racial unity, generally, Jays are dark-haired and dark-eyed. But how general is, quote, generally? When, according to Comas, 49% of Polish Jays were light-haired, and 54% of Jayish schoolchildren in Austria had blue eyes. It is true that Virchow found only 32% of blonde Jayish schoolchildren in Germany, whereas the proportion of blonde Gentiles was much larger. Gentiles. Give me a break, bro. Just, you mean regular, degular people. Like, I'm getting triggered by these words. I'm sorry. It's just so annoying. Um, okay. The proportion of blonde Gentiles is larger, but that merely shows that the covariance is not absolute as one would expect. The hardest evidence to date comes from the classification by blood groups. A great amount of work has recently been done in this field, but it will be sufficient to quote a single example with a particularly sensitive indicator. In Petai's words, with regard to blood type, J-ish groups show considerable differences among themselves and marked similarities to the Gentile environment. The Hertzfeld, quote, biochemical index, which has like a fraction, which is type A plus type B over B plus AB. So it's A plus AB and then over B plus AB, can be used most conveniently to express this. A few physical examples are German J's 2.74, German Gentiles 2.63, Romanian J's 1.54, Romanian Gentiles 1.55, Polish J's 1.94, Polish Gentiles 1.55, Moroccan J's 1.63, Moroccan Gentiles 1.63, Iraqi J's 1.22, Iraqi Gentiles 1.37, Turkestan J's 0.97, Turkestan Gentiles 0.99. One might sum up this situation in two mathematical formulae. One is, I don't know, I'm not a freaking mathematician. There is the formulas and there's the other one that I was trying to tell you. And I know it's backwards too, but whatever. Just so you know, I'm not making this crap up, all right? This is to say that broadly speaking, the difference in respect of anthropological criteria between Gentiles and Jews in a given country is smaller than the difference between Jews in different countries. So, what do you think about that? And the difference between Gentiles and countries A and B is similar to the difference between J's in A and B. So, literally, they're just regular people. They're nothing special. It seems appropriate to wind up this section with another quotation from Harry Shapiro's contribution to the UNESCO series, quote, "The J-ish People, A Biological History," end quote. The wide range of variation between J-ish populations and their physical characteristics and the diversity of the gene frequencies of their blood groups under any unified racial classification for them a contradiction in terms. For although modern racial theory admits some degree of polymorphism or variation within a racial group, it does not permit distinctly different groups, measured by its own criteria of race, to be identified as one. To do so would make the biological purposes of racial classification futile, and the whole procedure arbitrary and meaningless, which it is any friggin' way. Unfortunately, the subject is rarely wholly divorced from non-biological considerations, and despite the efforts continue to be made to somehow segregate the Jays as a distinct racial entity, they're not, bro. They're freaking regular people like everybody else. They're nothing special, and they're not chosen by God. God's chosen as people that believe in Jesus for their salvation. That's it. And also, just a little tidbit of information that I've researched, you can't just go in the country of Yasharel. You can't just go to the CVS and get a DNA test like you can here in America. You can't do it. And then if they do allow you to, you literally have to go in front of a judge and get a judge's permission to do a DNA test. And I think that's because they don't want the people there to know that they're fake Jays. And this is why we really need to pray for the regular Jays, okay, that are not like in on this whole deception, because they don't know. They literally have been taught to believe that they are, quote, God's chosen people, when literally, like, Satan Yahoo was dropping bombs on them too, and then acting like, oh, it was Hamas or some crap. Like, they are some serious, straight up lying liars. Anyways, okay. So, section 3. How did this twin phenomenon, diversity in somatic features and conformity to the host nation, come about? The geneticist's obvious answer is through miscegenation, combined with selective pressures. And I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of scientists, physicists, people that write the scientific papers, they're all J's. All the people that are in positions of power and control are all J's. That's not a mistake, dudes. Anyways, allegedly, okay? Quote, this, writes Fishberg, is indeed the crucial point in the anthropology of the Jays. Are they of pure race modified more or less by environmental influences? Or are they a religious sect composed of racial elements acquired by proselytism and intermarriage during their migration in various parts of the world? End quote. And he leaves his readers in no doubt about the answer. Beginning with biblical evidence and traditions, it appears that even in the beginning of the formation of the tribe of Yasharel, they were already composed of various racial elements. We find in Asia Minor, Syria, and Schmalestein that at the time many races, the Amorites, who are blondes, dolichocephalic, that's a crazy word. And I don't know where to put the emphases on the vowels. Dolichocephalic. And tall. The Hittites, a dark complexion race, probably of Mongoloid type. The Cushites, a Negroid race. And many others. With all these ancient Hebrews intermarried, as can be seen in many passages in the Bible. The prophets may thunder against, quote, marrying daughters of a strange god, end quote, yet the promiscuous Israelites were not deterred, and their leaders were foremost in giving a bad example. Even the first patriarch, Abraham, cohabited with Hagar, an Egyptian. Joseph married Asenath, who was not only Egyptian but the daughter of a priest. Moses married a Midianite, Zipporah, who, remember, the Old Testament gone, had them go unalive all the baby boys. Like, we already went over that. And it's the book of Numbers, I believe. You can go Numbers like 8, chapter 8, maybe 8, 9. Go look that up. Okay. Samson, it says the Jayish hero. They were not Jays in the Old Testament, bro. They were Hebrew. Words mean things, and there is no Jayish anything in the Bible. It's all Hebrew or Judean. Anyways. Was a Philistine. I didn't know that. Samson was a Philistine. King David's mother was a Moabite, and he married a princess of Geshur. As for King Solomon, whose mother was a Hittite, quote, he loved many strange women, including the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. And so the chronic scandalous goes on. The Bible also makes it clear that the royal example was imitated by many high and low. Besides, the biblical prohibition of marrying Gentiles exempted female captives in times of war, and there was no shortage of them. The Babylonian exile did not improve racial purity, like duh. And that's where they lost, quote unquote, their language. All right. Okay. Even numbers of priestly families married Gentile women. In short, at the beginning of the diaspora, the Israelites were already a thoroughly hybridized race. So, of course, most were historic nations, and the point would not need stressing if it were not for the persistent myth of the biblical tribe having preserved its racial purity throughout the ages. And also, all the genealogies, like I have said, were destroyed in 70 AD, so nobody knows who anybody is. They didn't have DNA tests back then. Another important source of interbreeding were the vast numbers of people in the most varied races converted to Judaism. Witness to the proselytizing zeal of the Jays of earlier times are the black-skinned Falasha of Abyssinia, the Chinese Jays of Kaifeng, who look like Chinese, and the Yemenite Jays with their dark olive complexion, the Jayish Berber tribes of the Sahara, who look like Tuaregs, and so on down to our prime example, the Khazars. Nearer home, Jayish proselytizing reached its peak in the Roman Empire between the fall of the Jayish state and the rise of Christianity. Many patrician families in Italy were converted, but also the royal family which ruled the province of Adiabene. Philo speaks of numerous converts in Greece. Flavius Josephus relates that a large portion of the population of Antioch was Judaized. St. Paul met with proselytes on his travels more or less everywhere from Athens to Asia Minor. Quote, the fervor of proselytism, the Jewish historian Reinach wrote, quote, was indeed one of the most distinctive traits of Judaism during the Greco-Roman epoch, a trait which it never possessed in the same degree either before or since. It cannot be doubted that Judaism in this way made numerous converts during 2 or 3 centuries. The enormous growth of the Jewish nation in Egypt, Cyprus, and Cyrene cannot be accounted for without supposing an abundant infusion of Gentile blood. Proselytism swayed alike the upper and the lower classes of society, which is wild to me because this is like after Jesus came. And these Jays didn't want nothing to do with nobody. They were giving off, you can't sit with us. So why are they proselytizing to anyone? And what is Judaism? Is it the following of the Torah, or is it the observance of the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud? You see? You see how confusing all this stuff is? It's not so cut and dry for you Christians or you Torah observant people. It's not. It's a very confusing, hot mess. But one thing is for certain, and 2 things are for sure. They are not Semitic. They are not the people of the Bible. Okay? They are Eastern European Khazars. Okay? Know that. All right. The rise of Christianity slowed down the rate of miscegenation, and the ghetto put a temporary end to it. But before the ghetto rules were strictly enforced in the 16th century, the process still went on. This is shown by the ever-repeated ecclesiastic interdictions of mixed marriages. Example, by the Council of Toledo in 589, the Council of Rome in 743, the First and Second Lateran Councils in 1123 and 1139, or the Edict of King Ladislav II of Hungary in 1092. That all these prohibitions were only partly effective is shown, for instance, by the report of the Hungarian Archbishop Robert von Grain to the Pope AD 1229, complaining that many Christian women were married to Jays, and that within a few years, quote, many thousands of Christians were lost in this way to the church. The only effective bar were the ghetto walls. When these crumbled, intermarriages started again. Their rate accelerated to such an extent that in Germany between 1921 and 1925, out of every 100 marriages involving Jays, 42 were mixed. As for the Sephardi, or quote, true Jays, what even is a true Jay? There's no such thing as a true Jay. Their sojourn in Spain for more than a millennium left its indelible mark both on themselves and on their host, as Arnold Toynbee wrote. There is every reason to believe that in Spain and Portugal today there is a strong tincture of the blood of these Jayish converts in Iberian veins, especially in the upper and middle classes. Yet, the most acute psychoanalyst would find it difficult if samples of living upper and middle class Spanish and Portuguese were presented to him who detect who had Jayish ancestors. The process worked both ways. After the massacres of 1391 and 1411, which swept the peninsula, over 100,000 Jays at a moderate estimate accepted baptism. But a considerable proportion of them continued to practice Judaism in secret. Of course they did, because they do everything in secret. These crypto Jays, the Marranos, prospered, rose to high positions at court and in the ecclesiastical hierarchy, and intermarried with the aristocracy. See, like I said, they married into and converted a bunch of these royals into secret Jays. Now there's a bunch of crypto Jays in all over Europe and Armenia, like the Donme, the Young Turks, like they were Donme Jays, and what happened and how many. Every time there's a big group of Jays that get into power, millions of Christians die. Bolshevik Revolution. The whole thing in Armenia, the Armenian Shmenocide. Okay, so and it's going to happen again because everyone is so brainwashed It just chaps my ass so bad. Anyways, okay. After the expulsion of all unrepentant Jays from Spain in 1492 and Portugal in 1497, the Marranos were regarded with increasing suspicion. Many were burned by the Inquisition. The majority immigrated in the 16th century to the countries around the Mediterranean, to Holland, England, and France. Once in safety, they openly reverted to their faith, and together with the 1492 to 97 expellees, founded the new Sephardic communities in these countries. So I wonder what this whole story about Christopher Columbus, sailing the ocean blue in 1492. I wonder, what does that have to do? Because these Jays, bro, they were getting kicked out 109 countries and kingdoms and counting, okay? Because this is what they try to do. They try to murk all the Christians, and they try to take over and act like, they're God's chosen people when they're not. Anyways, thus Toynbee's remark about the hybrid ancestry of the upper strata of society in Spain also applies, mutatis mutandis, to the Sephardic communities of Western Europe. Spinoza's parents were Portuguese Marranos who emigrated to Amsterdam. The old Jewish families of England who arrived here long before the 19th, 20th century influx from the East, the Montefiores, Lusadas, Montagues, Avigdors, Sutros, Sassoons, etc., all came out of the Iberian mixing bowl and can claim no purer racial origin than the Ashkenazis, where the J is named Davis, Harris, Phillips, or Hart. Wow. One distressingly recurrent type of event was miscegenation by grape. That too has a long history starting in Schmalestein. We are told, for example, that a certain Judah ben Ezekiel opposed his son marrying a woman who was not, quote, of the seed of Abraham. Whereupon his friend Ulla remarked, quote, how do we know for certain that we ourselves are not descended from the heathens who violated the maidens of Zion at the siege of Jerusalem, end quote. Grape and loot, the amount of the latter often fixed in advance, was considered a natural right of a conquering army. Yeah, and like graping a 3-year-old, goy is considered a natural right in the Talmud. So, these are God's chosen people. They can grape whoever they want to, even little babies. There is an ancient tradition recorded by Gritz, which attributes the origin of the earliest Jewish settlements in Germany to an episode reminiscent of the grape of the Sabine woman. According to this tradition, a German unit, the Vangioni, who fought with the Roman legions in Schmalestein, quote, had chosen from the vast horde of Jewish prisoners the most beautiful women, and had brought them back to their stations on the shores of the Rhine and the Main, and had compelled them to minister to the satisfaction of their desires. The children thus begotten of the Jewish and German parents were brought up by their mothers in the Jewish faith. Yeah, it all runs through the moms. Their fathers not troubling themselves about them. It is these children who are said to have been the founders of the first Jewish communities between Worms and Mayence. In Eastern Europe, grape was even more common. To quote Fishberg again, I just don't find any of this surprising, at all. Some things just don't ever change. Such violent infusion of Gentile blood into the veins of the flock of Yasharel has been especially frequent in Slavonic countries. One of the favorite methods of the Cossacks to wring out money from the Jays was to take a large number of prisoners, knowing well that the Jays would ransom them. That the women thus ransomed were violated by these semi-savage tribes goes without saying. In fact, the, quote, Council of the Four Lands, end quote, at its session in the winter of 1650, had to take cognizance of the poor women and the children born to them from Cossack husbands during captivity, and thus restore order in the family and social life of the Jays. Similar outrages were again perpetrated on Jewish women in Russia during the massacres in 1903 through 1905. That's unfortunate. All right, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to upload, and then I'm going to try to finish. Hopefully we can get this done, dude, because we're getting back to the end where the appendix, the references and stuff are. This is all that we have left. Oh my gosh, we're doing it. We're doing it. All right, Aaron Mack, BS Detector, out.